Hey all, welcome back. Professor Tom Hazel here. And as promised, it's been a while to get here, but I'm here. I promised a while ago that I was going to be uploading a video on test taking anxiety. Now, as far as I know, and I don't know much, but as far as I know, not a lot of information out there on this around nursing specifically. I see a lot of NCLEX prep type videos on the web, a lot of different people, a lot of different voices talking about a lot of different things, their opinion on what you need to focus on. I've seen very few that focus specifically on nursing and anxiety, test taking anxiety specifically. And I'm going to take an approach that I have seen very few people take. What I'm going to share with you today comes out of personal experience. Okay, this is not stuff that I read out of a book or I watched on somebody else's podcast or a TED talk, and I'm going to rehash it and give it to you. I didn't like that when I was in nursing school. I never liked professors who put up PowerPoint slides and just read the slide. And I'm thinking, good Lord, I'm an adult. I can read the slide for myself. I don't need you to read it to me. I don't want to do that. I want to give you something real, something that you can use, and something that won't stress you out trying to remember to use it to keep you from stressing out. So that's what this is about, a practical approach for dealing with test taking anxiety. I try to keep it intentionally as simple as I possibly can. Now, I'm going to go into some pathophysiology of anxiety because I think there are some things that you need to know about yourself or self-awareness in order to understand how I combat test taking anxiety, what I refer to as TTA, my contraction. You have to know these things in order to deal with it. You have to be aware that it's there, and then the best approach for getting rid of it. So let's take a dive. So test taking anxiety. Let's go and talk about. I want to lay in some groundwork here, and you might be thinking, well, how does this relate? Believe me, it will relate as we go on. How does an RN think? Now, the reason why you went to school in the first place, nursing school, college, university, the reason why you went there in the first place is not because you had a whole tens of thousands of dollars in your pocket that were burning a hole. Like, geez, I don't know what to do with this money. I know, I'll go to nursing school and totally destroy my life. No, you had a dream, you had a vision, you were focused. You're like, I want to be an RN. I want to be an RN or maybe an LPN, but I want to be a nurse. So let's talk about the way an RN thinks. This is what we try to train you on when you are in nursing school. Now, I've never heard it put this way. Again, this just comes from my experience being in higher ed for a decade, being a nurse since 2011, working the floor, you know, contact with students, patients, precepting, all that stuff. These are what I call the three heres. The three heres. The first here, HERE, is this. What do I have here? Now, anytime you get an NCLEX type question, anytime, you're going to get some kind of a patient scenario. Typically, you get a patient with a diagnosis. Not all the time, but I would say probably 99% of the time, your question is going to focus on a patient with a diagnosis. Now, the fact that they have a diagnosis in the first place should tell you something. And the something it should tell you is this: they're sick. Healthy people don't have it. You don't go to the doctor and get a diagnosis of perfectly healthy. That doesn't go in your record. Typically, I don't feel well. I let it go on for much longer than I should. Finally, break down, go to the quick care. They say, "Congratulations, Mr. Hazel, you've got bronchitis." There's my diagnosis. Okay. Pathophysiology deals with diagnoses, how to diagnose your patient, how to treat the disease process. So the first here is, what do I have here? What do I have right in front of me right now? I have a patient who is either mentally suffering, psychosocial, or physically suffering, pathophysiology. Okay. So what do I have here? So I'm looking at my patient. Now, the assumption of the test writer. Now, I say NCLEX questions. I mean NCLEX style questions. Whether you're getting them from UWorld, Archer Review, Simple Nursing, or just finding them on Quizlet or somewhere off the web. Don't care. The whole idea is you've got to get your head into this space. You got a patient in front of you. Now, the second here is this. How did we get here? So this is the assumption of the test writer. They will give you a patient with a diagnosis, understanding that your thinking will go backwards. How did we get here? I call this connecting the dots. On Bloom's taxonomy, you know, the Bloom's pyramid, these are called analyze level questions. The ability for you to connect dots. And where a lot of people trip up here, parenthetically, is they start reaching outside the question and saying, what about this? What about that? And that's called reading into the question. And that will lead to a train wreck. So go with what you got. Dance with the one who brung you. How do we get here? What's their history and physical? What are the things that went on? Maybe they came from a house fire. Maybe it's something that just happened. Car wreck, plane crash, whatever, natural disaster. How'd they get here? Maybe it's a chronic disease. Maybe it's asthma or heart failure. But we're looking back into that. We lean back into that. And then my final here, I'm present focused, past focused. So I've only got one place left to go, then to the future. Where do we go from here? So what I want to do is then focus once we get, I know what I have here, I know how we got here. How do we address this issue and get them on out of here? We want to send them home because let's face it, nobody, not even nurses, like living in a hospital. I go in, do my 12-hour shift and see you later till the next time, right? I want to go home. And our patients are no different. They want to go home. They don't want to have a roommate. They don't want to have all these noises and the smells and the terrible food and all that jazz. So now you may be thinking, how does this relate to test taking anxiety? Well, we're going to get there. Okay. Be patient with me. And excuse my mouse from showing up every now and again. So what we want to do now is we've got to trace backwards into, I know what my diagnosis is. Test taking anxiety. Anxiety is my diagnosis. What do I have here? I have anxiety. Okay, now I've been there with you. I've sat for several high stakes exams, most recent of which was the CNE, Certified Nurse Educator exam, just like the NCLEX, and I swore I'd never do that again. Oh well. Anxiety comes from fear. Think about it. This is a critical thinking exercise. Where does anxiety come from? The emotion it comes from is fear. So let's think about that. It comes from fear. Now, that begs the question, fear of what? Well, you may say, well, that's a no-brainer, fear of the test. It's more than that. Okay, so I want you to think broader than that. Fear of what? Fear of the unknown. Okay, so let's trace this again. I have anxiety. Anxiety is the diagnosis. That's where I ended. Now I'm thinking backwards. Anxiety comes from fear of the unknown. As it relates to whom? Me. Me. As it relates to whom? Me. I don't care about anybody else's anxiety. I don't, being honest with you. When I'm sitting for a high stakes exam, or when I was in college taking, we had 4 high stakes exams every quarter plus a comprehensive final. So we had 5 high stakes exams every semester in a 4-year program with as an associate's nurse, starting out as an associate's nurse. As it relates to me, I didn't sit there wondering about how my classmates are doing. When I went for the NCLEX, I was not thinking about the person in the cubicles next to me and how they were feeling. I was really focused on how I was feeling, and I was not feeling great. I didn't really like having the camera. I really didn't like the glass wall with the proctor and the dividers and the earmuffs I didn't like any of it, right? It's just the way it was. So, again, anxiety is the end. Anxiety comes from what emotion? Fear. Fear of what? The unknown. As it relates to whom? Me. There's a question under all of this that runs under all of this. And that question is this. I apologize, my bubble is covering the end. What's going to happen to me? That's the underlying question. What is going to happen to me? I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen to me. I don't know the outcome of this test, but I fear the worst. And now, why is it when we go for a high stakes exam, we get ourselves into a situation like this, that we never think of the best day ever, which again kind of goes to why I named this channel the way I named it. Best day ever. Why don't we do that? We typically think about the absolute worst things that could ever happen to us. You know those thoughts that wake you up in the middle of the night and keep you awake for way longer than they should? Typically, they don't focus on the best day you've ever had or the best moment in your life. They focus on the bad stuff. You were wronged by someone, or someone said something to you, or did something, or whatever. The things that get under our skin and irritate us, those are the things that wake us up and keep us awake. So for us, it's kind of that thought replacement thing. We got to think about the way I'm thinking. Metacognition, if I can use a big college word for you. Why do I think the way I think? What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to me? Well, let's talk about that a little bit more. So I got a question for you. When you're sitting for the NCLEX, when you're taking a high stakes exam, what's going on in your head? You know that song by Bad Wolves, Zombie, what's in your head? What's going on in your head while you were testing? What storyline are you telling yourself? What are you telling yourself? Are you thinking that, man, I got this, I'm going to give it my absolute best shot? Or are you absolutely losing your mind about, wow, this is just not going to go well? So what you focus on, I put a little magnifying glass up there. I got a little thought I want to drop on you. What we focus on is what we magnify. And that's why I chose this icon to use. I got a magnifying glass over the word focus. When I focus on something, it fills my mind. I'm really focused on it. If I focus on good things, then my mind is full of those good feelings, those happy thoughts, the best day ever. If I'm focused on the negative, that is what will fill up my mind, the negative. In the context of the NCLEX, I'm thinking about the worst possible outcome. Anxiety comes from fear of the unknown as it relates to me. What's going to happen to me? I don't know, but I fear the worst. And I'm going to focus on that. And then I just can't figure out why I can't take tests well. So I want you to be focused on that. Here's your focus. When you are testing, you focus on one thing. You focus on the question and you focus on the answers. I don't care if it's multiple choice. I don't care if it's a case study with the NGN material. By the way, that's the only place that NGN shows up is in the case studies. You got your bow tie, you got your drop down clothes, you've got extended, select all and apply, that sort of thing. That's where your focus needs to be. If it's anywhere else, then you're taking your concentration, if I can use the word energy, you're taking the energy that you need for this test and you're focusing it and putting it somewhere else. And typically you're focusing it on something that's not going to help you test better. It will help you test much worse. And I use the analogy of the alien in the movie Alien. If you ever saw that original movie, when the alien first shows up, it's very small, very small. But by the end of the movie, it has eaten most of the crew, and it is now huge. And why is it so big? Because it fed, and by feeding, it grew. And that's what happens with your anxiety. If you continue to focus on it, you are feeding it, and it will just continue to grow. And before long, it has overtaken you. So I want to talk to you. I told you at the beginning I was going to come back, or I wasn't going to come back to it. I was going to talk about the pathophysiology of anxiety. So I want you to know what's going on inside you. One thing I've heard over and over and over again is, Professor Hazel, I don't understand it. I will go to take a HESI exam, or I'll go to take the NCLEX, and I totally blank. I know this stuff. I know it, but I will sit down in front of the test and I don't know anything. What the what? Why does that happen? So let me talk to you about that. This is important for you to get a grip on this stuff. All right, the freak out. I'm approaching panic state. I'm on my way. Here I come, panic. I'm on my way. So remember, just to review, anxiety is the diagnosis. Where does anxiety come from? Fear of what? The unknown. As it relates to whom? Me. What's the underlying question? What's going to happen to me? I don't know what's going to happen. As a result, I start freaking out. Sit down, the NCLEX starts, questions start coming up on the screen. I get a question. I've never heard of this diagnosis. I've never heard of this medication. I don't know. And the smoke starts slowly coming out of my ears. Everything starts to burn. So let's talk about what's going on. Now, go into little minute detail here. Your amygdala in your brain is responsible for triggering your sympathetic nervous system. Now, you nursing scholars that are listening to this all know that the sympathetic nervous system controls, say it with me, fight or flight. Okay? Sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. Parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest. See, we did a little rhyme thing there, so it'll help you remember it. We're going to focus on the sympathetic nervous system. So the amygdala triggers the sympathetic nervous system. As a result, there's a cascade of events that start to happen. Sitting on top of both of your kidneys are these little tiny glands called your adrenals. And adrenals, part of what they do is the stress response. They're responsible for releasing hormones into our bloodstream that will trigger the stress response. The first of those is adrenaline. Adrenal glands produce adrenaline. Who knew? So adrenaline is squirted into your bloodstream. Now, adrenaline is a very curious drug or hormone. The synthetic version of adrenaline is called epinephrine, and I know you've all heard of that, right? EpiPens. So it's a very curious drug. I'll stick with that word. It does two things. It vasoconstricts, but it bronchodilates. All right, and this will make sense as I get in. Maybe you've already connected those dots. But here's what happens. Adrenaline is released, and I start vasoconstricting. So my hands will get cold, okay? Why? Because blood is shunting. I'm vasoconstricting. Blood is shunting into my core. It's going to my large muscle groups, my biceps, my triceps, my quads, my glutes, my calves. It's moving in that direction. Now, the constriction will cause that will cause several other things to happen in conjunction with what adrenaline does in and of itself. So adrenaline has an immediate effect on my cardiovascular system. My pulse rate increases. All right, so my heart starts beating faster. So vasoconstriction, okay, everything constricts, pulse goes up. So and you think about it, you're driving along in your car, in your motorcycle, your moped, whatever. You're riding along, and someone pulls out in front of you or cuts you off. And before you give them the finger, your first response is, "Oh my gosh!" And your heart rate in the space of seconds doubles or more. Just boom, boom, boom. You can hear your heart beating in your ears, and wow, that was exciting. So that's the effect of adrenaline. So pulse rate increases. Now my cardiac muscle is burning through O2, which means that I'm in oxygen deficit, which means that my respiratory system has to kick in to compensate. So my pulse level is up. Now my respirations are up. Remember, I'm vasoconstricted. Blood can't get to where it used to go as easy as it used to get there. Why? Because I'm clamped down. Therefore, BP has to increase as well, because the heart has to hit the blood harder to get it out there to the extremities because I'm clamping down. So pupils fully dilate. That means that there's very little color left in there. It's mostly just a black orb. Okay, I am ready. I'm wired up here. I'm ready. I start sweating. Diaphoresis kicks in, right? Everything's clamping down. I've just got sweat starts to pour out of me. While I was taking the NCLEX, all of these things happen. Okay, that's why I'm going over them with you, because at the time I didn't know what was happening to me. But over the years, I've figured it out. So everything's up. Everything is up. And now to help the situation, and I mean that sarcastically, another hormone that's released from my adrenals is called cortisol. Now, cortisol, what that does is it stimulates the liver to release my glucose reserves. Now, and everybody knows that glucose is a sugar. OSE, your OSEs, I call them, glucose, fructose, lactose, maltose, your oses, sucrose. I have a rush of sugar that's released into my circulatory system. So now I am full of adrenaline and I'm also full of sugar. So I look like that little kid in the checkout line at Walmart that just, screamed at his parents until he got a candy bar and a 2-liter bottle of Coke and is just, pounding it down and spinning around in circles and doing all the things that little kids do when they eat sugar. So that's me. That is now me. I got all this cortisol in my bloodstream. Why cortisol? Why? All right. And again, critically think about this. Fight or flight. Fight or flight. Either way, I'm running. If I'm in fight mode, I'm running. The firefighters on 9/11 ran into the burning buildings. Fight. Or I turn and run away. Flight. Either way, I'm running. But my body is going to need that jolt of sugar to feed my muscles so I can then do the next thing. You guys have all heard stories of, people that I remember hearing a story about a mom whose car rolled over and her child was under the car and she picked the car up and threw it off the kid, right? No recollection of doing it. No idea how she did it. Nevertheless, that's what happened. So this is what's happening to me. And I'm sitting in a chair. This is all happening to me. And I'm sitting in a chair in a testing center with a camera on me. And I can't make a sound, right? I gotta be super quiet. And I'm literally in my chair vibrating. I am shaking. All right. I am in full on panic mode. This is full on panic. And now you know why. Because of this cascade of events that is happening. All I can think about is I want to get out of here. I want to get out of here. Why? Because I want to run away. Because the NCLEX was the best and worst day of my life. It is everything I had worked for. Going through nursing school, sleepless nights, all those papers, all those tests, everything that I had gone through came down to one exam. Now it's called the NCLEX. I wanted to pass that test more than anything else in the world, but the last thing I wanted was to be at Pearson VUE in this situation, taking this test. It's actually a psychological term for this. It's called approach avoidance. So I want to get out of here. So what I do is remember, what I focus on is what I magnify. Previous slide that I talked to you about, what I focus on is what I magnify. I want to go. And the more I focus on the way I'm feeling, the worse it gets because I'm magnifying it. I'm focused on the fact that I don't want to be here. I don't want to be taking this test. I want to run away. And think about the dichotomy of this. You have been trained for maybe the previous, if you're in a bachelor's program, the previous 4 years have trained you to run towards danger. That's what we do as nurses. We get there. We get in between the patient and death. That's our job. And yet all I want to do is run away from pixels that show up on a flat screen monitor. I'm afraid of that monitor and the mouse and the whiteboard and the mark. I'm afraid. I want to run away. So I got a question for you. This might hurt a little bit, but I got a question. If I can't hold up under the stress of taking a test, what am I going to do when it's real? What am I going to do when I'm on the floor and I've got an emergent situation, or I've got a patient threatening to kill me, which I've had done multiple times, or I've been punched or kicked or spit on, had my hair pulled, whatever. All these things that can happen in the life of an RN that nobody really thinks about. I didn't think about them when I was going through nursing school. But if I can't hold up under the pressure of a test that is no threat to me whatsoever, no physical threat to me at all, this is just, again, pixels on a flat screen monitor. If I can't handle that, what am I going to do when I have to handle the real deal? So I want to plant that in you and remind you of what you signed up for. You signed up to be a 1.5 responder. You run towards danger, not away from it. Okay? I'm just going to review my notes, make sure I hit it all, and it looks like I did. So let's move on. Is there a cure? Yes, there is, and they're a great band, by the way. I just saw them at concert this past summer. There is a cure. TTA, is there a cure? Yes, there is. Number one is recognition. Recognition. Now you know the why. Now, I want to add one more thing to the why. Here's the worst part of test taking anxiety and adrenaline and cortisol is that when I get into this mode, and if you think about this for a moment, if you've ever been there, if you've ever been in that place, whether testing or in a different, maybe you've been in combat, maybe you've been a firefighter or an EMT, you've been in that place, we lose all executive brain function. This is the worst part. We lose the ability to logically think. Our frontal lobe shuts off. Because, here's the why, because survival is our most primitive instinct. Fight or flight. Either I fight and vanquish my foe, or I run away to survive to live another day. It's our most primitive response, and it doesn't come from our cortex up here. It comes from our medulla oblongata back here. It's our primitive brain. Why do I blank out when I'm taking a test? Why can't I remember anything? Because you've lost it. You've literally lost it. You are now working off your brainstem, and all you can think about is, I've got to get out of here. I've got to run away. So what's the cure? Well, recognition is part of the cure. And I'm going to give this to you very, very simply. Now, I've seen and heard a lot of different people talk about ways to deal with anxiety. Too many steps, way too many steps for me. Again, I think I started off the session by saying, I don't want to give you stuff to reduce your anxiety that's going to cause your anxiety to rise and freak out because you can't remember all the things you're supposed to remember to reduce your anxiety with. Intentionally simple. First step, disconnect. Now, do you have to raise your hand and ask for a break? If you're in that kind of a place, yes. Here, I'm going to tell you what I did. I'm taking the NCLEX. This was 2011, June of 2011. I'm taking the NCLEX. And I walk into Pearson VUE and I go through all the, stuff you have to go through to even get into the testing center. And I sit down at my cubicle and I've got my mouse and I've got my flat screen. I've got my whiteboard. I've got my dry erase marker and I've got a set of earplugs. By the way, if you didn't use earphones or earplugs during your nursing career, don't make that change now. Don't do anything different. Stick with what got you there. Dance with the one who brung you. So here I am, and the NCLEX starts, and I'm like, okay, here we go. And I'm answering the questions, and I'm moving along, and of course it feels like I've been in there for 1,000 years. And I let my eyes wander up to the top right corner of the screen, and I happened to see the question number and the timer. And I lost my mind because the timer told me I'd been there for, I think, 20 minutes, and I'd answered something like 7 questions. And I just thought, this was back when the NCLEX was 265, okay? The max questions you could get was 265. Minimum was 75. Yeah, 75, 265. And I had this thought, I'm never getting out of here. Never getting out of here. I'm going to be here forever. And this, you had 6 hours. I think they've lowered it to 5 now. Now it's 85, 150. 5 hours to take it. And I just freaked out, totally freaked out. And I remembered what I did when I was in nursing school. When I was taking an exam in nursing school, when I started to feel that way, what I would do is we had a test sheet, we had an answer sheet, and I had a number 2 pencil, and I seemed to have misplaced my number 2 pencil. But we had to fill in little circles, fill in completely with your number 2 pencil. And I would put my pencil down, and I'd take my feet, make sure both my feet were flat on the floor, and put my hands flat on the table. And I would close my eyes, and I would just take some deep breaths. And I would just focus on nothing to do with the test, anything else. I'd look up at the front of the classroom. I'd look out. There were windows over here. There was a door over there. I'd look down at my feet. Sometimes I'd look at the professor. They'd look at me wondering what the heck I was doing. Didn't care. But I just needed to focus on something other than the test. Why? Because I was magnifying my anxiety. I was focused on the way I was feeling. So I would just disconnect. Take 20 or 30 seconds. Take some deep breaths. Okay. Pick my pencil back up and start in again. So I did that on the NCLEX. I just disconnected. I literally put my hands on the table, pushed myself backwards from the desk. My hands were drenched in sweat, fight or flight, diaphoresis. They were drenched, and I wiped my hands off on my pants. And I had a little conversation with myself in my head, and it went something like this. What are you doing right now? Oh my gosh, you have spent 4 years getting here to this test. A 2-year associate's degree took me 4 years to get through. I was going to school part-time. What are you doing? You're going to blow it if you keep doing this. And again, this is all inside my head. I'm having this conversation. So I made a deal with myself. And the deal was this. I was not going to look at that timer and question number again. I was not going to do it. Why? Because it triggered me. It was a total and complete trigger. So what I did was I took my, and this, by the way, this is the thing I just found out recently. This is actually a thing. It's called the 20-20-20. For every 20 minutes of testing, you take a 20-second break and you focus on something 20 feet or more away. Now in the NCLEX, nothing's 20 feet away. But the idea, remember, we're not going by the letter of the law here. We're going by the idea behind it is I need to disconnect. I need to disconnect and focus on something else. And what I would encourage you to do is have a happy thought. You know, the whole Peter Pan thing, think a happy thought and you can fly. If you are starting to freak out, disconnect from the test. However you do that, disconnect. I close your eyes, whatever. Is my breathing high? Is my pulse out of control? And again, you don't have to do any of this stuff. Just real quick inventory. How am I doing? If you got to close your eyes, but just disconnect from the test. Remember, our attention spans are somewhere between 15 to 20 minutes long. Any more than that, and our mind starts to wander. We can't help it. If you got ADHD, it's even less than that. We can't help it. We just can't help it. That's our attention span. And I'm expected to sit here for up to 150 questions, up to 5 hours. I've never sat in a chair for 5 hours before and take this test. So disconnect. Quick check-in. Am I okay? How am I doing? Okay. Think I'm good. Then re-engage. You do that as many times as you need to. Don't worry about the clock. If you can clear 85 questions before the test shuts down, you can pass the test. Does not matter if you make it. If you go past 85, by the way, that's a really good time to take your full-on break. Raise your hand, get out of the testing center. I know more grads that have told me that once they got to 86, they just all they focused on was the timer. Am I done? Am I done? Is this the last question? Again, as I mentioned in a previous slide, your attention is on one thing, the test and the answers. That is all. If you find yourself focusing on the timer and the question number, you are in the wrong place. You're just in the wrong place. Stop, recenter yourself, re-engage. Okay? So disconnect from the test. Think about something else. The time is not your enemy. You are. You are. Knock it off. Stop that. Don't worry about the clock. I have talked to lots of grads who didn't make it. They went past 85. They didn't make it to 150. The test shut down and they passed. It doesn't matter how many questions in you are. Once you get to 85, it does not matter how many questions in you are. It matters how you are answering those questions because you're looking for that upward trend of correct answers that prove to the NCLEX not that you're smart, but that you're safe. That's why you are there, to prove safety. The clock is not your enemy. Change your focus to something other than the test. As long as it's a happy thought, doesn't matter what it is. Make sure you are breathing. I've been a ski instructor, a downhill ski instructor for 30 years. And when I'm instructing adults, something that especially a first-time adult, never skied before, something I see all the time is that they do two things. Number one is what I call going zombie. They go straight out zombie, arms straight out, locked elbows, locked legs, everything's locked up tight. Once those skis start to move. The other thing they do is they hold their breath. Part of the fight or flight response. Okay. If you are not breathing, guess what? You're not oxygenated and your brain needs some O2 to do its thing. Make sure you're breathing. If you are again, remember vasoconstriction. Adrenaline is a vasoconstrictor. And here's the other part I never told you. It's a curious med. Vasoconstricts, but it bronchodilates. And now you know why. Because I need the ability to take in lots of air because I'm going to start running. Make sure you're breathing. Okay. Now, I don't know if this link will work or not, but this is an excellent video. I'll put this down in the comments below if it doesn't work in the video itself. Pearson VUE put this out. What to expect on testing day. It is an excellent, excellent video. It's not very long. It's not nearly as long as this session has been. Highly encourage you to watch it. Okay, so let's quick recap. Anxiety is the diagnosis. Anxiety comes from one emotion, fear of what? The unknown, as it relates to me. The underlying question is, what's going to happen to me? That's where anxiety comes from. Okay, remember, that's the end result. Anxiety, this is the analogy that I use, it's not Dorothy's house that falls out of the sky in the land of Oz and crushes the witch. That's not what anxiety is. It doesn't just fall out of the sky and land on you. We create it. We create it. It's self-destructive thinking. So I've tried to give you some very, very simple things to do. I don't want to stress you out with having a huge list of things you need to remember. Remember the most important thing. Know yourself. How am I feeling? If you know that you're not feeling right, disconnect from the test. Your attention span is only about 20 minutes long. So 20, 20, 20. For every 20 minutes of testing-ish, again, I don't want you staring at your watch, but when you start feeling that urge that you need to speed up, I need to go faster, I need to get out of here, remember, that's all part of fight or flight. That feeling to hurry up, that's all part of fight or flight. Why? Because I want to start running. So disconnect, deep breaths, think a happy thought, think of anything else other than the exam, re-engage. Do it as many times as you need to, because at the end of the day, what you're after is not to do a great job on the NCLEX, it's to get RN. That's what you're after. All right, got any comments or questions? Please leave them, I guess, down below. If this video is helpful to you, if you think it's a good thing, then tell somebody else about it. I'm not after, I don't even know how YouTube works, likes and shares. I don't know how it works. I'm not after that. I'm just after trying to help you guys do a better job on your exams. Okay? So wish you all the best. Again, if you've got any comments, feel free to leave them down below. Thanks, guys.